What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass project build series, where I take this Cutlass wagon I found in this dude's backyard, pull it out of the weeds, and start tearing this thing apart. I'm building this car to be my next power tour car. It's going to be pretty unique, and you won't see anything else like it out there, at least as far as I can tell. I'm all about the unique cars, and this one is definitely up there. It's going to have a 3800 with an F23 5-speed manual, and a bunch of other really cool stuff to really set this car apart from the rest of them. So in the last few videos, you guys watched me tear this car down, tear out all the interior, tear out the old engine, all the wiring for that, and plop in this 3800 and the F23 5-speed manual. Had to build my own engine mount for it, but otherwise this thing fit in here pretty nicely. And so from there I went ahead and in another video started working on the exhaust, got that turbo plumbed in there, and all the exhaust squeezed in this tight thing now. From this point forward, I'm going to be working on the intake manifold. So now I've got the exhaust sorted out, I can work on the intake. So that's what's happened in this video. I hope you guys are interested in seeing this sort of thing. I think I'm pretty happy with these results so far. So we'll go ahead and just dive right into this project. So in the last video, I alluded to the fact that this car is not going to be a twin charge. I'm taking the supercharger off of it, so I went ahead and started working on that thing. The goal of this video, or this project at this point, is to get the intake fitted properly on the car, and this kind of turned into a snowball effect where I started looking at some of the intakes I had, and then just kind of, you know, this got off track pretty quickly. So first thing I wanted to try is the F-body intake I had lying around in stock already, because I figured that would be the best shot at making this thing work. So I'm trying to get this F-body intake manifold onto this engine, and I'm running into a little bit of an issue. It's actually hitting this engine mount here, this bracket for the coils. So just FYI, if you're using a W-body coil bracket, you're going to run into some issues with this thing rubbing into it there in that spot. And you can see I can't get this thing bolted down all the way because of that. So I'll just have to grind this down a little bit in that one spot, and see how we can go with that. And I'll check to see if I've got another coil bracket here too, actually, because this is for a supercharged car, so that might be the issue, but I'll double check that. So here you can see the challenge with the F-body intake. So the F-body intake is pretty popular for a turbo build because it puts your intake on the other side of the car, so you can run your turbo over here, put your intercooler up front here, have your plumbing go straight back this way and into the intake manifold, instead of having to do like a back-to-back thing here. And like I've said here, real estate is so limited here on this side already that I don't want to put the intake facing this way still. It's possible, but it's going to make this very difficult to work on, so I don't want to put it over here. So the intake has got to come over here, throttle body's got to be on this side. And the F-body intake is the typical solution to this. Now, there are two of them. This is the later one for drive-by-wire, and the later one is flat, basically. You see how the throttle body flange is basically vertical? On the pre-2000 or so, the 98s for sure has it. The whole throttle body is facing downward a little bit. So this car actually has that. So I'm not sure if that's going to be enough, though, for this to actually fit. So here you can see this one. It is basically facing somewhat downwards and to the left. So that could help out a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be enough to move the needle. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be enough to move the needle. Unless like this space here is a lot less than that side. Because that would mean it's moved in a little bit more too. Well, maybe. It could maybe work. So that could be a solution. I think that could work a little bit better. I mean, this could still work, but that one would fit a lot better in here because it moves this back about a ½ inch to an inch and then gets the angle started already, and doing so too. So that might be a good option. The other problem I have with the F-body intake, though, is that these openings are very small compared to like the throttle body for the L67, which really is the one I want to run here for this. So I don't know if you can see much of the difference, but this one is slightly larger, And it makes a pretty big difference when you're trying to get on a throttle on this thing. So if I measure it, I think that this comes out to like 63 and this is 61 millimeters or something like that. Now I could put this here. So this is what this would look like basically if I put this here. That's how much space I have to work with on it. And so you can tell it is very tight. Possible, but it is so tight. And I'm pretty sure this whole thing has to get rocked forward right here, basically. So it's possible. So I would put it here. I have a flange that it goes into too. It's possible. It's possible. So maybe. So I started this F-body intake for a while longer, and I realized I probably don't actually want to run this thing with the coolant reservoir and the washer fluid reservoir I wanted to run in the car. And so I started to take that one off and look at some of the other options I have. I have basically every intake manifold that the 3800 ever came with in my garage, fortunately. So I tried the L26, and that just wasn't quite right. That's the aluminum one. It was facing too far backwards, and it stuck out way too far to the left to make that one work. I also tried the Holden intake, but that one was just too tall, and it was just facing the wrong direction to really make this thing work in this car, because there's just no space in front of it, especially with that dog bone there, so there's no way I could have made that one work to go out that left side. So I have a bunch of these intake manifolds here, and none of them are really going to quite work out for this setup that I'm doing in this car. The closest thing I have that could work here for this would be the F-body intake, because this places the intake on the opposite side of the engine. So in a rear-wheel drive car, your intake is facing towards all of your belts and accessories. So that's in front of the engine. But on a front-wheel drive car, though, it's facing the rear of the engine, which is where your bell housing is. That would be over there on that side like that, right? So I really want to keep that intake facing this way, so I can actually route the intercooler straight off the turbo over there, come over here, and then I can have a good air-to-air intercooler without having to do that back and forth thing and fit all that piping there in that side, because it's going to be really tight in this car. This should make the belt routing a lot easier, I think. So I'm going to try and get the intake on this side of the car, and the simplest thing I think I can do here with this is to just use this supercharged lower intake manifold. Not this one, I'll use the other one I've got over there, and just basically have a pipe that comes out of it like that into the throttle body, make a flange for it, and then have the throttle body on this side of the engine. And to do this, I've got to make a whole plate that sits on top of this that bolts down and kind of takes up all this space here. And a pipe would be the simplest way of doing that, but if I'm already going to be making this plate, I might as well just go the extra step here and make like a big plenum, I guess, right? So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up one of these intakes, give me a bit more out of it on each side, maybe go about 2 inches or so, wherever this intake itself ends at, and try and make a larger plenum up top here, sort of like a sheet metal intake type of thing. And it's literally going to be a sheet metal intake. So I'm going to be using this sheet metal plate down here, and I'm going to cut this thing up here to work as that intake. And here is the intake manifold I'm going to be using. I pressure washed this one, I cleaned this all up here, and it's looking fairly good. It is got a lot of miles in it, but so the plan would be here to drill a hole somewhere up here to give me this nice rounded corner, and then cut up the intake up to that point, cut across it too, and have a nice bigger opening, and then do the same thing on this manifold here as well, and give it the same size opening so it matches up nicely to it. And then from there I'll just build like a ramp off the side of this so I can have this nice cool looking intake. So I think that that's what I'm going to do here for this. And the benefit of this is that I'll have a very short runner, right? So you have the supercharged intake manifold, which has almost no runners at all, which is going to give this a lot of high-end RPM power. It's going to kill all the torque down low, but that's okay, actually, if you ask me, for this car, because I don't want this thing making a ton of torque. I want this thing to just make power and just be something that revs. A couple reasons for that. The engine block I'm going to be using here, that short block, has some pretty weak rods in it, so it's not the strongest short block. And also this transmission, I don't know if it can really handle that amount of power. So I want to try and play it safe as much as possible with this thing, while still having something that can be fun and can be a good driver. The torque is what breaks things, not the horsepower. So that'll
hopefully keep everything happy for a while, and then have a sweet, you know, one-off weird looking intake. And I'm all about that weirdness here, so that could be pretty cool. I think it's going to be weird looking for sure, though, I think, because it's going to be so narrow, and it's going to be kind of like those, you know, those high ram intakes. It's not going to be a ram at all, but it's going to be like a, you know, an abomination of that. So then I'll be using the larger throttle body too, which should give this a lot bigger of an opening. So I have a North Star throttle body that's going on here. The stock L67 throttle body for the supercharged cars is 69 millimeters. The L36 is 67 millimeters. This one is 75. Not quite an LS style throttle body, but it's going to be, you know, a lot more volume of air that this thing can flow compared to the stock ones. And if you go ahead and watch some of Richard Holdner's videos, you'll see that these things really do need a bigger throttle body, even naturally aspirated. You can only imagine how much of a bigger throttle body they need when they're boosted. I'm going to go ahead and do some marking this thing, figure out where I'm going to put all these holes at, try and make this look somewhat neat on this side. Then I'll have to go in here and cut off these little stands that's holding this on, and kind of build up this intake. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today because I'm going to play some video games tonight, but I'll try and get some of this done here. All right, so I did some measuring inside of here, and it's not going to be perfect. I knew that going into this. I knew it wouldn't be perfect. It is what it is. It's a short, flat piece of metal, right? It's not going to be that great of an intake, even with all the modifications I want to do to it. So what I'm going to have to do here is, or what I think I'm going to do is, I'm going to go all the way to where basically this valley ends inside of here, and that's about 3 inches inside of that. On this side, it's not quite 3 inches because you have this runner right here that gets in the way, and it kind of jogs inward like this. But I think that's not going to be a big deal. I might just connect the dots here, honestly. It won't be crazy pretty, but what else am I going to do with this hole, right? I'm just thinking out loud here, guys. I'll start drilling some of these holes up top here, and I think down here I won't drill any holes. I'll just, again, connect the dots. And then hopefully try and smooth this whole thing out. It's not going to be pretty, but it should hopefully make some power. So we'll see. All right, so this is what I've come up with here. Again, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but this opening should give this a lot more flow, hopefully. I didn't want to have to jog over like that and make this such a weird shape, but it's kind of just the nature of this beast that we're playing with here. There was a hole here already, and it didn't really make sense to cut halfway through it. So might as well go into it and smooth it out. Most of these open up directly into the manifold. However, port number 6 is a little tight here, so it's, again, just the nature of the beast. It is what it is, and again, I'm not too worried about this here at all. It's just there's ports all over, and it's only going to get what it's going to get, right? So if you look into there, you can kind of see there is a bit more room for it to flow more. So the next part here, I do need to tap these. I don't need to do that right now, but I'm going to put a pipe thread tap through here. I think it's a 1/4 inch pipe thread that goes in there. I've heard people will just like hammer in dimes too, so you could do something like that. These are the coolant ports that would go to the throttle body, and I'm not going to be using those here. There's no point in that for this car. I'm using the North Star throttle body, and there really isn't a port there for that. So go ahead and block these off here, and I'm going to use pipe thread here. That way I'm not relying on this flange to seal this. That way I can just pull this off easily and not have it worry about gaskets or anything like that. So now I need to go ahead and start cutting the new flange, and that's going to be on this piece of sheet metal. This is I believe it's a 11 gauge piece of sheet metal, so I don't know if this is overkill or not, but you know, with enough RTV, this should seal up just fine, right? So, all right, so I got the plate cut up here. This is kind of what it's going to look like. Still need to do some more cutting here and trimming of the stuff that I don't really need here. The next thing I want to do is get this thing drilled in. There's a couple dowels on this plate below here that I kind of want to get lined up first before I go ahead and start working on this thing. I think what I'm going to do is just kind of put the supercharger on this and just start marking it. Yeah, so I've got some deep reach markers that should help me get through those holes, and that should help me center this thing and figure out where it's all going to be. So I'll go ahead and place this on here. Okay, and just go ahead and start marking these holes. I'll start with the dowel holes, I think, too. I might be able to fit a regular mark in there, actually.
Alright, so I'm working on this intake manifold again here, and I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to put this throttle body. Yeah, I couldn't put it out as far as I wanted it to just because the bracket in this thing is way bigger than I thought it would be. I just picked this up from the junkyard, so it's the first time I'm seeing this for this throttle body. So that's kind of unfortunate. So I think I'm going to have to put it about right here. It's going to be angled down a little bit, and that way the throttle cables can go at it from that top angle they want. And then that'll aim it down towards where the intercooler is going to be anyway. And that should help me clear the hood a little bit. So it'll be tight. And I think that this should clear the belt too. That was one concern I had too, because the bracket was making this thing get pushed down further than I wanted it to, and it was going to hit the AC belt. So I think I've got this in a good spot here, hopefully. And I can probably mess with the angle a little bit, but I think I've got the general location here. So I'll weld a plate on this side of it to basically give it something to attach to, and then I can move the angle however I need it to be to make it work here. So I need to go ahead and start working on that plate. And for that plate, I have this guy right here. It's a little thicker than it probably needs to be. It's a little overkill. This is about 1/8 of an inch or so. It's pretty thick. It's a thick boy. Wow, it's about a 3/16. So yeah, it's a little overkill, and I need to get a hole in this thing now though, so that's going to be kind of difficult. I have the drill bit for it, or I have a closer one. It's about 2 7/8 of a hole. That's a big drill bit to be drilling through something this thick. So I'm going to try and see if I can get this thing drilled through, and I'll have to probably use a carbide bit to get the rest of it out to match the throttle body itself, but we'll start with that and see how that goes. So this is going to be kind of sketchy. Alright, so I've got this plate pretty much drilled for this throttle body. I have all 3 drill holes done. These bottom 2 were tricky because these were dowels. And eventually I'll figure out how to get a bolt in there or a nut, probably on the other side somehow. Then basically just trim this whole thing down to mesh with the throttle body itself. So I'll just kind of trace this outline here and basically cut the whole thing down to that size. Otherwise though, this thing is pretty much done. You can see that it does open. I do have some gap to fill there still too. So I went ahead and just trace it out, and so I have some idea of where I will finish cutting that thing out. And then on the other side of this, I need to figure out where these holes go. So there's holes up here for the IAC and also for this that's not being used at all either. So I'll go ahead and probably drill out the hole on the other side for that, and then just leave this one shut. I don't think this one goes through actually. It just opens up in this side, but I do still have to cap this one off because this is going to be a boost leak with the way this is planned out right now. So I'll go ahead and just rip this thing off of here, and well, first I'll trace it out and then figure out what this has to look like on the other side, and hopefully the gasket left an imprint on top of this plate so I can see where things are actually sitting. So as you can see here, my solution to actually get this thing bolted on was to just weld nuts in the back side of this. The nuts aren't going to go anywhere if I weld them on properly. It seemed like the best solution to do this and keep things sealed up properly. Alright, so I've got this thing separated now, and I've got a good idea of where I need to cut this thing now. This is the gasket, so I'm using this as sort of my template to try and get things lined up nicely. So if you look at this guy right here, you have your IAC, which you're going to flip this thing around, it's going to be like this, it's going to be the other way. So IAC is on the other side of it, and then this side is that little hose that goes there. That's for a PCV system, and I'm pretty sure this is blocked off on the manifold side too, on the North Stars too. So I'm going to keep that blocked off here. I won't drill anything on this side. So that's the big side, right? Small side, I'm going to drill through this, so that way the IAC still works. And I'm not going to get this whole thing open. I'm going to do maybe a couple holes, I think. And maybe when the die grinder gets here, maybe I'll open it up all the way or close to it. But it doesn't need to be that far open. You know, if you look inside of there, you have your IAC valve, and it is only so large, right? So it's got a round fitting there, a round hole size. So as long as this is pretty close, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. So the dowels are in here, and they are trimmed down a little bit, and it does still line it all up. So I think I'm feeling pretty good about that. It's a lot flatter now too, so I was worried this piece of metal was warped, but I think it's gonna be good. So we'll go ahead and figure out how this is gonna sit in here, and then just do some tacks and get that done on both sides. I think right about there is how it's gonna go. So, and we'll go ahead and start burying this thing in. Placing the throttle body in this car has been this delicate balance of making sure it clears the hood, making sure it clears the belt, making sure the throttle can open, making sure the cables will fit there. And in this, I go ahead and start looking at the belt system, because it is so tight, and I just want to make sure that it would still fit. I think it's going to clear it. It's going to be tight, but I think it's going to clear. So it's going to be basically from this alternator down to this stud. That's where the AC belt's going to go. And this should probably clear it, I think. If I get enough of a 45 in here, I think it will be fine. It can't really go any higher. It can maybe go a tiny bit higher, maybe. I could angle it up a little bit more, possibly. I just don't know how much space I have. So I could clear all this stuff off the hood and go check it, but you know, that's a lot of work. So I might do that. I'm gonna do that actually. That's not good. All right, so I've looked at this for a little bit, and I think I'm happy with where this height is actually. It is ever so slightly touching the hood liner, but I'm not that worried about it. I think it's going to be okay. Once this is all closed off, this is going to be a flat surface here anyway, so I'm not concerned about that. I do need to cut this thing off and just take off all this excess material, and just kind of clean this thing up a little bit. It's going to flex more if I do that, but yeah, I'm not too worried about that. So okay, so I think I've got a success story here. This is clearing pretty well in here. I don't know if I can get you in here, but there you can see got the throttle plate up there, and it's all fairly level. It could come down a little bit by that top part of it, but things aren't catching. But the headliner or the hood liner is going to come off, so I decided that I don't want any cloth getting caught in that throttle cable, so I'm going to pull that off. Otherwise though, I think that this is going to work. It's not hitting the hood metal at all, so you know, I'll take what I can get. Yeah, I think the hood liner coming off of that should have no concerns at all about this thing. Okay. So you're probably looking at this thing thinking that the ICM is right in the way of this bracket here, and that's right. So in this build here, I'm not using the ICM as intended, so it's basically going to be doing nothing. It's just going to be converting signal for the stock PCM with the way I'm wiring this car. So I'm not going to worry about that. It's going to get moved probably. There's going to be nothing here for this to hit, so this is going to be a good spot for it. Okay, so that's looking good. Now at this point, I need to go and finish the rest of this intake manifold. Basically what I'm going to do is build some cardboard cutouts of what this could look like. Basically it's going to be kind of like a zoom, basically. So that's the idea, I think. I've thought. All right, so I've got my cardboard cutouts here. I think I have a pretty good plan of what this is going to look like. This is going to be my intake. So I'm about to create the world's heaviest upper intake manifold. So hopefully it doesn't weigh like 20 pounds when it's all said and done. This is some pretty thick sheet metal. I think it's 11 gauge, 1/8 inch, something like that. It's not thin. It's pretty thick. Hands are dirty. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some of this stuff up, get this thing going. So it should look pretty sweet. All right, so here are both of those pieces cut out, and I just kind of put them on the ground, leveled them out in the bottom, and just trace them over with the cutoff wheel with a little flap disc. And I've got a pretty even curve here. I'm pretty happy with that, I think. It's probably the best I could do with the situation I have with this. I thought about going a little bit lower here and then having more of a nice gradual exit there, but I think this will still be pretty good for what I'm doing here. Now the challenge is going to be, I can tack it in there, but I need to basically bend it at this point on both sides of that to clear this throttle body and kind of curve the one side and hopefully kind of curve the two. It's not a great, there's not a great way of doing this really. So I'll just try and do the best I can with what I have. The front is going to be tricky. The rear is going to be kind of tricky too, honestly. What I'll probably do is I'll probably cut like halfway through a groove there on either side, about right here. That way I can actually start bending it and, you know, just kind of see how this goes. It's a learning process for me. I've never done anything like this before. Probably either the coolest thing I've done, or it's probably the most janky thing I've done in a while. So it could look cool, but I don't know. We'll see if this can work out. It's gonna flow. It's gonna make some air. It's gonna make some power. It is weird, but it's. I think it's cool. So there you go. I said it. Okay, I think I have what looks like it could be an intake manifold someday. This might be the dumbest good idea I've ever had, because this thing is going to be so heavy, and it's really a shot in the dark as if this thing is going to flow well at all. So we'll see how this does though. Like, I feel pretty good about it. This right here is probably the weirdest thing about it, is this little curve here, like how it jogs over like that. But the way I see it, the throttle blade is right here in the center, so it's probably not going to damage flow much at all, hopefully. Ideally, in a better world, if I were a better welder and I had the right tools, I could probably make this out of aluminum, but here I am stuck making it out of steel. It's not going to be that bad. It is kind of thick. It's going to weigh like 20 pounds probably, all said and done. So it's going to be a big boy, but it's going to be unique. I mean, how many other people are doing this sort of thing? There's a handful, but like most people do like an exhaust bend on here. So I think this is going to be kind of cool, and it's going to be perfect for the way this turbo is going to set up. So intercooler up front feeds the throttle body on this side, straight out of the turbo over there. So that's how that's going to go. So yeah, not my best welds, but I'm not upset about it. So I will probably double up everything on either side of this just to be sure that it doesn't leak at all. I don't want any vacuum leaks, any sort of pinholes anywhere at all, if at all possible. Alright, so it's the next day. I'm working on the car here again, or at least kind of putting my fingers on tools. I'm not really committed to working on something right now, but I'd rather be in here than doing anything else right now. So I'm out here working on the car and just kind of playing with things, mocking things up to see how things are going to fit. I do have this vacuum manifold that I was planning on running here, but it's a lot bigger than I thought it would be. So I don't know if I'm going to run this, just because it's kind of ridiculous. It's you know, it is huge. There's space here for it, so I could technically run this thing, but I might try and find a smaller one. I'm not sure. So for the vacuum system, again, street car, so I'm still hooking up the evap system on this thing. I'm going to be hooking up the HVAC too, because that's all vacuum operated.
There's also the brake booster too. There's the fuel pressure regulator. There's the blow-off valve. And there's also a vacuum canister in this car too that I think I'm going to plumb into. It's already here. That'll be nice to have. So there's a lot of things that I need to get plumbed into this. So that's the reason for a manifold. Now, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get this stuff plumbed into the intake because, of course, with these engines, the upper intake manifold holds all the vacuum tees and all that stuff. There is actually one on the bottom there too that I could use. But I want to take advantage of all this space I have here and knock out a bunch of them. The one on the bottom is pretty small. So down here, you can see the one on the bottom. So that's the vacuum port down there. That's the boost reference port for the L67 for the supercharger, because that's where you have your boost pressures below this plate here typically. So if I can't find a spot for some of the stuff above here, I can always reuse that. The challenge right now is just trying to figure out how I'm going to plumb something into this, because there's not going to be enough engagement for a pipe thread on a plate this small. It needs to be a little bit thicker for that to actually seal properly. And I could probably get away with doing this as it is and thread it in there. It might be fine. I'll get like 2 threads total possibly in that thing for a 3/8 inch pipe thread. I do need to go to like a 3/8 at a minimum for this brake booster. The brake booster is a 1/2 inch inner diameter on that tube, so I want to be able to get a 1/2 inch on there as well. So I do need to make sure I have a larger thread size, and the larger your thread size, the thicker your material needs to be to get that engagement onto it. So I'm looking at some ideas here for how I'm going to make sure this thing seals up properly and how I'm going to get some vacuum ports on here. At a minimum, I wanted to do 2, I think. So 2 vacuum ports plus the map sensor. That needs to be on here too as well. And here's the map sensor. So it's a GM LS9 map sensor. They use these on a lot of the newer cars that run a decent amount of boost. It's a 3.5 bar, so it should be pretty good. So I'll run that one. And what I'm thinking here is that I could make this plate and bolt this on, and then this would give me all that thread engagement, would be pretty lightweight still, and I could basically get everything onto this plate. Now the trick is it's aluminum, the manifold is steel, so I would have to seal this up somehow, drill some holes in the manifold, seal it up, and then maybe somehow weld in some bolts there. And I'm trying to figure this all out now, because once this top part is on here, it's going to be hard to access everything. So if I need to do a 360 weld on something on this side here, the best chance of being able to do that is with this off right now. So that's the thought process behind that. So I'm thinking I could make basically a rectangle out of this thing somewhere on this plate. It's just a same piece of aluminum I used for the engine mounts, just more of what's left of it. And I could basically find a way to put a hole in this thing, and actually that's a pretty close size hole there. So I could put a hole in this plate and size it properly for the map sensor, put another hole here for 1/2 inch or 3/8 inch thread, pipe thread, another one for like a 1/4 inch, and somehow seal it up in the backside, maybe RTV or something. But all right, so this is what I've come up with so far. It's took about 2 hours to make this little contraption. What you have here is 2 3/8 pipe thread holes, also threaded in an M6 hole here for the sensor. And I wanted to get one more bolt hole here, but it's a little bit tighter than I thought it would be. And really I couldn't move these holes around too much, because on the other side of this I'm going to be using these grommets, and they're pretty sizable, so there's not a lot I can do as far as space goes, and maybe I could have gotten that one in there, but you know, I'm not too worried about it though, because I don't think there's going to be as much force push on this side as it will be right here with these 2 larger ports. So you have 2 here and you've got the 1 here. I think that should be enough to hold this thing down. And I decided I'm going to use these grommets. I have a ton of these laying around, so I figured I might as well. So basically what I'll do, go away, don't need you, don't need you. All right, well, I'll clean this up some first, but these will fill these holes right there, and now I'm having second guesses about some of this, but that's kind of the idea of what's going to happen here. So these will seal it on this side, and you know, if this doesn't work, I can just put a bead of RTB down. It's not going to be a big deal. I don't think this is ever going to come off anyway, so probably not even worth worrying about it. I actually kind of thought these pipe threads would go deeper, but you know, you learn. So plan B-ish. We're plan A-B. We're doing plan A-B, I guess. So plan A-B is not quite B, but still kind of A. I think I can still get these things on there. I don't know. So that's the bridge I'll cross later, but the bolts are going to come through here and go through the intake manifold like that. And I think I'm going to weld the bolts to the intake manifold. That way it's just like studs on this side. I'll just go ahead and drop this real quick. So it'll be, so when you go ahead and put this on, you just line up the studs, and that'll keep this all lined up and nice and good. Now, of course, I'll use different pipe threads on this side too, but what I'll do first initially is I'll get this mounted to the intake manifold, drill all the holes, pull this stuff out. I'm not going to use this one or this pipe thread. I'm going to get some different stuff for this. So this will go to a manifold, a vacuum manifold, and this one will go to the brake booster, and this is the map sensor. And then I'm thinking over here, the blow-off valve is just going to come off of this little port down here. So I've got this one down there, you can kind of see right where my finger is pointing. So the blow-off valve will be probably maybe right in here. It could be in that side too, but if it's right here, I can just run that port straight to that. Yeah, so the flange will go somewhere up here, and then the vacuum manifold will probably get mounted down here somewhere. Be a nice, clean, hidden install, hopefully clean-ish. So once I have that flange in there and the manifold, I can basically weld this whole thing up. I do need to go in here and clean up some of this stuff here so I can make room for the injectors, but otherwise, though, it's coming together and it's looking pretty good. All right, got it bolted down. Decided to do bolts on the inside of this thing and then just weld them in, because I realized that if I have bolts that are just kind of tacked in on the inside, or if I have a nut that's tacked in, I'm gonna have a leak on this thing, a vacuum leak. So I just went ahead and just welded them fully all around. Kind of sloppy, but it's gonna work out pretty well here. And then this is on here kind of just mocked up for now, but I'll go ahead and just try and make it look a little bit cleaner. As long as it seals, you know, it's gonna be fine probably. So yeah, that's I'll need to go here and clean some of this stuff up, but otherwise it's looking good, you guys. I'm happy with this thing. I think that tomorrow I can just cover this whole top of it and then be done with that, get some more bolts, and then this thing is going to be pretty much wrapped up. I do need to go and still drill out for the PCV holes. So the crankcase has a vent somewhere right here and another one right there, so I'll try and retain some of that. So that's what they look like here, by the way. So you have one right here, one right here. Those are your crankcase vents. Those go down straight into the crank. They go down, you can see this is one of them right here. That's one of the crankcase vents. So that's something to kind of look out for, but gonna take advantage of those things, and I've got some pretty cool ideas for how that's going to work out. I should be able to retain the factory PCV in this car. I didn't do that in this car. This car has just got vents that are plumbed straight into the intake, no catch cans, anything like that. This one though is going to have a pretty legit PCV setup. It's going to keep a PCV valve, and it's going to have the PCV working almost as if the factory intended it to. So that's gonna be pretty awesome. Hopefully that means there's no fumes, no smell of gas, and should make this thing pretty happy. So that'll be cool, and it's only possible because of the EFI system I'm using on the car. So I'm really looking forward to some of that. So that's gonna do it for tonight though. I'll catch back up in the morning and hopefully knock out the rest of this stuff. Yeah, this escalated pretty quickly actually. So I finished up last night and I walked in the house and I realized that I forgot two important things to get onto this car. One is an intake air temperature sensor and the other is a PCV system. So I have the IAT will be on this plate right here, and PCV, also brake booster, will be on here, and then this kind of represents what's going to be feeding this vacuum manifold. So that way PCV and brake booster are separate from vacuum signals. Probably more overkill than necessary, but I mean, you're making your own intake manifold, you might as well go to the next step anyway, right? So we're already going overkill, let's just keep that theme going, right?
So that's pretty much how this is going to be. What I did is I welded another plate in here because I needed some more thickness. I didn't want to play this game of playing with aluminum again, so this took way too long last night. So this was way easier. I just welded the plate onto here, so now I have a 1/4 inch plate there instead of just an 1/8 inch, and that should be enough to let this seal there. So I'm not worried about that one at all so much. And this is 360 welded, so no chance of that plate leaking. A little bit less than ideal probably, but I'm not worried about it. You know, a tiny little vacuum leak probably won't be a big deal if this does leak somehow. So that's all well and good. There's still a couple things to work on, but I can do that after I weld this top plate on. So that's coming up now. And so I'll just get a piece of cardboard, mark up what it's going to look like, how it's going to fit. Then I'll just tack weld the plate down here, bend it, tack it, bend it, tack it, bend it, tack it, and just keep that going until it's pretty flat here. And then this will be one spot where it's going to be kind of tricky, where I don't want to damage these threads, but I want to keep this pretty low. So I think I'm going to sneak up on it like this, and then just I'll chase the threads afterwards on that bolt to keep that thing happy. And I did go ahead and clean up the inside of this thing. I took a wire wheel in here, and then just took off all the loose slag from all the welding, you know, just all of this stuff here like that. There are smaller pieces that'll come off, so I spent some time brushing this stuff. This won't come off. It is what it is. So as long as it doesn't come off inside of this manifold while the engine is running, I'm okay with it. So I'm not going for perfection here. This is no SEMA stuff. This is just will it run and go to Cars and Coffees? Will it make boost? So I'm gonna go ahead and get some cardboard and start cutting this thing up. All right, so here it is. It is mostly finished. I do need to go through and do the PCB stuff still. But otherwise, though, I'm not upset about this thing at all. I think it's looking pretty good. Some of the welds could be better, but as far as my welds go, this is really good. I've done worse and a lot worse, and I've done better in some cases, but I'm happy with this. I do probably want to go through and do some pressure checking of this thing somehow. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. Or I might just like throw it on the car and do the good old brake clean vacuum leak test afterwards. This is pretty much how I imagined it. So intake manifold, or upper intake manifold, version 1.0 is pretty much complete. Like I said, I do still need to do the drilling of the PCB stuff. But otherwise, though, this thing is pretty much done. So yeah, first intake manifold I've ever built, and I'm happy with it. So with the intake manifold having a top on there, I still need to check it underneath the hood and make sure that fit nicely. And then also I need to go ahead and make sure that the throttle body did actually clear the belt as well too. So I went ahead and checked that as well. Alright, so the good news is the belt clears massively. It's not even close to being an issue. I have plenty of clearance here around this whole thing. And cables seem fine too. I'll just go ahead and wrap the cables back through that way, and should be good to go for that. So I'm pretty much all or relatively buttoned up here in this intake manifold. I can't think of anything it needs at the moment. It clears all the fuel rails. I also have the PCB ports in here, or at least the crankcase vents. So this is one of them right here. They would have come straight up out of that lower intake manifold, but I wanted to get them going sideways, so I built this kind of janky looking 90 here, so that's going to work out just fine, I think. So that should be cool, hopefully. Then there's just a hole drilled inside of those things at the bottom of them, and you know, if I need more flow, I can always drill it out some more, I suppose. But it should be good enough for the PCV system in the car, and I'll detail all that stuff later. Probably have another video about that. Fuel rails, this is kind of how those are going to sit too. I think I'll have a fuel line coming here for the return out there, and then this will connect here. So then the return will just come off of this one off the back there into the fuel pressure regulator. But I also want to smooth out these exits in the runners of the intake, so I want to get rid of that lip there. Basically, I'll just put some metal down in there to give it a straight shot downwards, probably. So yeah, the manifold's coming together. It's looking good. I'm pretty proud of this thing, you know, even though it's probably my worst idea I've had for good ideas. My worst good idea I've ever had. So I'm thinking about putting some sort of like detail on top of here just to like weld in some letters or something to say like 3800, Series 2, L67, whatever, I don't know. Or like throw like the YouTube channel name or something like that in there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. So the engine will get painted here, and I'll reveal all that stuff later probably too, and do the whole YouTube thing, do all the clickbait stuff. Probably won't do that. I'll tell you now, it's going to be blue and silver probably. That's my guess. So, but I do need to rust protect that thing and keep it from wearing out. And I think inside of it, it's going to get protected by all the oil going through the PCV system. It's just going to coat all the walls of the intake manifold. So that should rust protect that at least. But all this exterior stuff is just going to, it can't get wet. It's going to get so rusty between now and whenever I paint it. So I need to get that paint in there soon, actually. There's still a lot left to do on the engine, but worry about some of the other stuff later. So this was a big hurdle that I've been kind of worried about for a while, but it's looking good. You know, I'm happy with how I did this. I've been thinking, you know, if I'm going to be doing all this work, I might as well make it look kind of cool somewhat, or at least make some effort to make it look cool. And I think I've done that here. I think I've made something that looks pretty sweet. So that's just my opinion. When it comes to your own projects, you gotta do what makes you happy, and this, I think, makes me happy. So next things to do here, I got a ton of them. So I need to work on some of the interior stuff. But I think the engine is pretty much ready to get pulled out here and work on actually building the proper engine for this thing and mocking all that stuff up. The car really doesn't have any deadline at all. Actually, the deadline is Power Tour next year, so I have 8 months to work on this, I think. 7, 8 months. That should be plenty of time to get all this stuff fitted up here properly, replace all the things that are broken, rewire the whole car. That's like enough time, right? So we'll keep at it and see how far I get tonight. Keep working on this thing and see how much progress I can make. All right, we'll get to it.